Hi, welcome to another Random Ramblings or Ramblingly Random. We're going to be talking about this, which is Larian just basically confirming that they're not going to do a Baldur's Gate 4 DLCs or expansions. And while it's very self-evident and whatnot, I wanted to explore the reasons on why this is, not just on what the developers say, but also sort of the underlying thing that's not really being discussed. Because I think there is something that Larian's games have always been doing since their inception, and I'll explain as we just go through this. So, basic thing you can read yourself as well, just like contrary expectations, but I've never been more sure about the strategy. This is the right for the Larian. I understand there will be disappointment because people fall in love with what we created. It was the story with the beginning, middle, and end. It doesn't really it doesn't need more. The team has grown a lot during Baldur's Gate 3, and I think you'll be very excited. And someone who deleted this, I guess, talks about the characters, and I think Wizards of the Coast will know how to do that. There's also they're not done with operating, right? So that's basically it. Same with the these ones also say this similar sentiment that yeah, Larian is done with Baldur's Gate 3. They're not. Their next game is in Divinity. That's also confirmed. They also were kind of working on sort of DLC stuff, but then cancelled it. And the fundamental thing is that yeah, Larian simply just wanted to move away because they didn't really feel like making DLCs or expansions or a sequel were really what they wanted to do, you know. And that I think is true as well. But I think there's another true statement that's not really being spoken about. And a quick history of Larian's game is that Larian's games never really have DLC. There may be some like extra content stuff, like with Baldur's Gate 3 that has that epilogue slide and whatnot, and Divinity Original Sin 2, which does have like some extra added content, skins, weapons, stuff like that. But what is not really being spoken about there is that they don't really have anything else. They don't really have DLC in the traditional sense where you have to buy it, or expansions where you have to buy it. A lot of the additions they make are basically endings. They just finish their games. With Divinity original, no, with Divinity 2, Flame of Vengeance, that was the original title for that game before it was Ego Draconis. That game's ending was basically terrible. The game ended off with the player just basically going, "Oh yeah, well, you're stuck here at the end. Let's quickly pull it up." Ego Draconis. Wait, no. D2 Flame Vengeance ending. Oh no, I was wrong. I think it's Ego Draconis, and then Flame of Vengeance was the DLC. Cause, look here, yeah, there you go. So basically, the ending is like, okay, cool. You have a big fight and whatnot. It's all getting hype. Character you know since the beginning betrays you, and now you're in the crystal with Lucian the Divine. It's like, okay, cool. That's your fate, and the game just ends. It ends with the city being destroyed, and that's it. That's literally it. And a lot of people like that for obvious reasons. And so Larian made DLC, you could say, but it was for free. You could just download it and it was yours. Flame of Vengeance. And that basically just added the ending, and since then, that's been sort of Larian's sort of design philosophy with at least additional content. It's just like they finish up the game. They add extra stuff that they should have done during the development, but didn't have time nor the money for it, and so since it's released, they added. Same happened with Divinity Original Sin 2. Its base ending was pretty bad. They made it better. Same with Baldur's Gate 3. Base ending was bad. They made it better. And yeah, that's always been sort of Larian's idea. They wanted to make a game that was finished and didn't really need to be added extra stuff. Because the reason why developers make DLCs and expansions is simply because there's more room. And also you can make more money on a game. It circulates more into the news cycle. People will go, oh, look, new game that was good has new good stuff in it. And it gets more sales, and it gets more hype, gets talked about, and it keeps staying into the discourse, right? And Larian's strategy is obviously not that, and for a variety of reasons, same what Sven said. But additionally, I think it's ultimately because of how Larian makes their games. Larian's games have been very choices and consequences oriented. Their very pure design philosophy, N+1 design, has always led them to have a huge amount of interactivity and reactivity for the world, right? Characters will comment on your background, your race, your actions, and will generally change the trajectory of their own characters and the quests associated with them. And like, yeah, that's something that Larian has done, and it's also very small ways. One of the small ways I can say is that during Act 1, when you meet Auntie Ethel, if you kill her before you kill any of the people who are masked by her and being controlled by her, they'll be set free. One character specifically will be set free. This dwarven woman will then reappear later in Act 3 and talk to you about and talk to you, which is quite good. Like, it's something the player does, not killing them, freeing them, and then you meet them later on. It's a nice bit of interaction. It's really great reactivity. It makes the player feel like that not only the big choices matter, but also the very small choices matter. And Larian's design philosophy makes it hard to do DLCs and expansions because of this N+1 design. And what I mean by this is this. So, any expansion after the game, right, will have to contend with the fact that people want the companions that they grow to love rejoin them, right? And this is very difficult for a couple of reasons. One, because, well, there are a lot of different states for each of the companions in Baldur's Gate, at least more than 3. Dragon Age Origins had an expansion, an end of expansion, called Awakening. And in Awakening, you only had one returning companion, and that was Oghren. And Oghren could have died during Dragon Age Origins. And so they basically just kind of messed around and, basically said he doesn't die, right? No other companions come. Not your love interest, not companions that said that they would keep with you throughout the adventures, like Zevron, or like Shale, or stuff, or like Win, or stuff like that, depending on your choices and whatnot. Shale and Win doesn't join, they go somewhere else. Yeah, but like Liliana and Zevron definitely like imply that they'll join you, continue after your adventures, but they don't, right? You get a note from your love interest, from your romance, talking about where they're going and whatnot. You don't even get your dog, right? Like, your dog companion just doesn't show up. It's weird, right? And Alistair shows up sometimes, and if he's a warden, he doesn't stay. Like, if he doesn't become King of Ferelden, and he stays a warden, right? And, like, he just doesn't stay. And that's the sort of thing that, even in Bioware, where I think Dragon Age Origins doesn't have as much reactivity and choices and consequences as Baldur's Gate 3, especially to the extent that Larian went with it. Like, you can kill literally every single NPC in the game. It's like, wild, dude. You can't do that in Dragon Age Origins, because it would break so much of the story. So, because of that, and because of, like, even in Dragon Age Awakening there was that issue, this is times 10 for any DLC or expansion that Larian does. Because now, for an expansion after Baldur's Gate 3, you have to worry about this sort of thing. So, water. So, for example, Gale can be a god. Outright god of ambition. Now, that's kind of hard to do, because now Gale no longer has to be a companion in that capacity. Gods can already interfere with the mortal plane, which means that they can only work through proxies and stuff like that. Gale can probably show up from time to time, but he can't really be a companion, and it doesn't really have any sort of relevance to that sort of thing. Astarion can become a vampire ascendant. And, okay, cool. That's something huge. Like, basically no one can really threaten Astarion, and whatever power level you go through that expansion has to be raised up so that Astarion doesn't really just kill everything immediately. Because in, sort of a lore and gameplay sense, Astarion's very overpowered. And then you have characters and like Shadowheart, who can become the leader of the new Sharon cult. You have Lizelle, who can be a champion of Laketh, a champion of Orpheus, or just, they're defeating Laketh and whatnot. And then you also have You know, things with Jahira, Minsk, and whatnot, and how they can sort of develop as characters as well, and what trajectory they take Baldur's Gate. You have Halsin, who can, you know, have the Shadow Curse lands, you know, be lifted and be in there, have an orphanage. There's just so many permutations to each of these companions who most people want in the next game. And so, okay, cool. What do you do then? Do you add them? Do you not add them? And people would be, I think, quite rightly a bit mad, like with the Dragon Age Awakening, that their companions, the ones that at least make sense to come back, aren't there. And so this expansion would have to be with new characters, and people don't really, I think, want that, you know? At least from the companion side of things. Additionally, you have to add the fact that all of them could be dead. That's like, yeah, in Dragon Age Origins, all of them could be dead as well, to some extent. But it depends on, you can kill them only in specific circumstances. Alistair can only really die during the Archdemon fight, not really beforehand. Same with, yeah, basically that. Shale can only die during like Caridin's, if you go against Caridin, right? She can only die right there. And so now you have this issue that Baldur's Gate has, which is they can die at any point, at any time, and whatnot. And now when you have a new expansion, you can't really develop on them. An additional layer of issues is that you could be playing any one of those companions. You could be Karlach, and you could be dead, because you just chose not to go to Avernus. You could be Gale, and you could be dead because you exploded yourself. You could be, you know, any of those companions, and that game would have to recognize that sort of scenario. And this is the thing. A lot of people will say like, oh, but that's worth the effort, right? Larian has done such a small amount of things, allowed small details to, you know, grow into very big things, right? That's great and all, but the thing is, for Larian's philosophy, they want to have games that feel finished, complete, and whatnot, and that's why they have the endings be free and whatnot. And so because of that idea and philosophy and whatnot, they don't really see a reason to make DLCs or expansions, right? It's something that's unnecessary for them to do. Because, again, most reasons why DLCs and expansions is to add extra content that developers feel like weren't there, and also to sort of keep the game in the discourse, right? Larian's obviously going to try a different avenue for that, such as the modern support, and still updating the game with like new cinematics and whatnot, but they're not going to do that with DLCs, right? And that's a strategy that's theirs and perfectly fine and whatnot. A game that has expansions and DLCs is not inferior to what Larian's strategy is going with, right? And that's, I think, what a lot of people are very missing in that sort of idea. It's easy to make an expansion to a game where it's easy, like, for example, right? In Witcher 3, the choices that you make in the game, while big, aren't really going to affect, the Blood and Wine DLC, the Blood and Wine expansion, right? Same with Dragon Age Awakening. There are a lot of choices, but it doesn't really fundamentally change what that thing is about. With Larian, it changes a lot. An additional layer I also forgot to mention is that perhaps all the companions died, and then you died at the end. For example, right? As playing as Gale, right? Say, for example, someone chose Gale as their playable character, and then they, at the end, explode themselves, and that's it. All companions are dead. No one is left. You just basically, end the game with everyone dead. So now, what happens? What happens in an expansion like that? Well, there's no expansion, basically. So whatever threat that comes from that expansion can't really be anything that big or unusual as well, because what if all your companions are dead? And this is like Larian's strategy. Why Larian is able to do a lot of the things that they do, like reactivity and huge amount of choices and consequences, is because they don't really make true sequels in that sense. Now, what I mean by this is that they're mechanically the same. Baldur's Gate 3 fundamentally is, at its core, Divinity Original Sin 1. Fundamentally, it's maybe Divinity Original Sin 1 may be a stripped down version of Baldur's Gate 3, but it's still the same engine, still the same game. But the issue is with sort of a narrative sequel, right? And Larian's never really made a narrative sequel. They do have 2s in their games and do have sequels to their previous games, but a lot of the time they're not really sequels. They use the 100-year time skip thing. Same with Baldur's Gate 3, same with Divinity Original Sin 2. There's no real there's no real connection from DOS 1 to DOS 2 because it's set 100 years apart. There are no returning characters, at least none that I can think of, and the stories aren't really the same. It sort of focuses on the same sort of ideas of source, but even then, it's not really acknowledging what happened in the previous game regarding that choice. It's not really a sequel to DOS 1. A lot of what happened isn't there anymore. And additionally, with the whole Divinity franchise, none of it's really connected. And that's a thing that I think a lot of people aren't aware of because they haven't played those games. Because they're not connected. They just don't have any real relationship to each other. Divinity 2 Ego Draconis is the latest in the timeline for all the games. And the way Divinity Original Sin 2 ends does not make sense or in line with that game, right? It's like, okay, no idea how this can like relate one to another. And then with like Baldur's Gate 3, right? If Larian did make a sequel to Baldur's Gate 4, to Baldur's Gate 3, to Baldur's Gate 4, they're basically just gonna have to do a 100-year time skip. There's no way they could make a sequel and sort of validate the choices that the players made. BioWare is literally the only studio that does that. With Mass Effect, from having similar characters throughout the entire trilogy, to Dragon Age, which having like same world state and references to each thing, right? Even in scenarios where BioWare does like retcon stuff, like Liliana's death, it's still expanded. It's still recognized and acknowledged. The character did kill Liliana. It's just that, well, something changed and something happened for her to stay alive. You still did kill her at the Urn of Sacred Ashes. It's just something else happened in that situation. And Larian just doesn't do that. Now, that's not a flaw to Larian. Technically, it is. It's Larian's greatest advantage and disadvantage. Being able to just make a game its own game and not really have any connections to prior games or to future games is a strength for Larian, because it means that they can just focus on the game itself and developing it and and sort of not having to worry that, oh, this is going to be a terrible thing for the next game, oh, this is going to be a terrible thing we're going to have to handle in the next few games, right? Mass Effect struggled with this a lot. In Mass Effect 1, you could kill the Council, and with that idea, it wasn't really fully fleshed out in Mass Effect 3. Yeah, sure, you could get the Destiny Ascension if you save the Council, but like, overall, it didn't really change that much, you know? And it's still like one of the best examples of a series that has done choice and consequences through a long franchise. Again, Larian just chose a different path from BioWare, you know? And yeah, that's it. And I just wanted to talk about that because I feel like while this is like definitely, and a lot of people are just saying like, oh, it's cool, Larian, if you don't want to move on, won't move on. But I just want to expand on that point of like why fundamentally Larian did this. You know, it's not just that their hearts are not in it, it's just that their own design philosophy is a kind of against it. It kind of makes it a lot harder to do it. Which, you know, any sequel that they make to the Divinity franchise is going to face the same repercussions. It's going to basically be, oh, cool, new cast of characters 100 years after the previous game, or maybe even like reboots the entire franchise, has no relations to previous characters, and then after that game, they're either going to have to do another 100-year time skip, or reboot of the franchise, or just move on to another project. Again, it's just something that I think people don't really understand or recognize as one of the reasons why Larian isn't, you know, making expansion to it or a future sequel to Baldur's Gate. So yeah, that's me being randomly rambling. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and please do leave your own thoughts about it. Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? And if you think I'm wrong, I don't know, something wrong with you, I guess. So yeah, please do comment down below. Maybe like, perhaps even subscribe. Anyways, enjoy it, okay?